We can't stop winning, boys. You know, I was going to do another video on another show before this, but god damn it, this show feels a lot more prominent. And I like this one a lot more, so this works out well for me, actually. So I actually watched Owl House when it was up to about episode 12 when Adventures in Elements first came out. Just around the time it had a short break. It was a fantastic show, I enjoyed it a lot. And I went into the fandom a fair bit too, and then I kind of left it alone for a bit, planning to go back to it after the season finished. And then it was flooding my Twitter feed. Follow me on Twitter, you bastards, and also subscribe and like. Do it now. Statistically, you're more likely to if I say that right now. So I decided, alright, I'm going to catch up on the show. It's been a while, and this is genuinely one of the few shows I know right now that genuinely makes me smile and is actually funny. And I'm going to end up being spoiled at this rate, so yeah, I was very much down for that. So, spoiler warning, I guess. Because I do actually want people to watch this show, because it is goddamned glorious and deserves it. So if you've not seen it, go watch it immediately, via official means if possible. Help boost the ratings, because goddammit the show deserves it. But if not, there are plenty of streaming sites available online. In the description below, there will be a link to an official server that only works for the Americans, unfortunately. If you're not going to, or you already have, then here we go. Holy crap, it got so much better, and oh my word, I will admit, I didn't expect this. I really was thrown for a loop with this one. I genuinely did not expect it to go down the route of an actual, open, extremely explicit LGBT representation. This genuinely shocked me. There is so much I could praise this show on. It's genuinely hilarious, and I'm pretty sure it's specifically calling me out half the time.
Now, I'm coming at you with a blast of fire. What do you do?
It's a fucking mood right there.
Like, I write fanfics of food falling in love. I like food, I like love. Just let me write about it.
I think this show might very specifically be calling me out here.
Hey, there's more to life than shipping.
Don't you dare insult shipping in my presence.
Yep, okay, yep, this show's got my number. It's shown us exactly what it's fucking going for. Oh boy.
Last chance to back out and earn a new bad girl coven patch. Quitting! It's like trying, but easier.
I fucking love the show. I'm having fun here, alright? I'm having fun. For fights can be incredible. It is insanely good with character development, can be incredibly intense at times, and obviously I'm very much in favour of the representation. I'm very, very fond of this show. Anyway, to be completely honest, before this I wasn't sure what the politics of this show were going to be. The show was very much still in its infancy when I viewed it for the first time, and I wasn't sure what to make of its messaging. If you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that I'm very much of the mindset that all art is political in some way, regardless of the form in which that politics may take. Sometimes it may take a bit more thinking and a bit more looking into things to figure out what the politics of a certain piece of media are, but the politics are there all the same. And with the Owl House, it was a bit harder to figure out. There are a few scraps, but they hadn't been explored all that much, so it was hard to say what they were going for, or if they were just passing fancies. Obviously, Ada is an anarchist. I mean, come on. Like, do I even need to justify that one? Really? She literally lives in a hut away from people and opposes more or less every concept of authority as it exists in the show. She's an anarchist, come on now. Amazing as she is though, I can't make a full video extrapolating the entire political messaging of the Owl House from Ada alone, although at this point I think I could do a bloody good job trying. I do like to think I have a bit more awareness than that. Then the fact that we're actually going with LGBT representation with this show made it all click in my head. I know what this show is about and what it's going to be. And if you want my political perspective, then this show is something that we should be rallying behind. I read all of that before episode 18, by the way. I am nothing if not bloody vindicated. Once more, I am the leftist god of media. Part 1. The rejection of social norms. I suppose we'll start with the big one that's been making waves recently. But first, a bit of an overview. The Owl House follows a character called Luz Naceda, a Dominican-American girl who is obsessed with magic and nerd culture and games, and she's me, alright? Yo. She's literally just me, but more hyperactive and less socially awkward. She's a baby and I love her, okay? Anyway, Luz stumbles upon a portal used by a witch called Ada the Owl Lady to travel between the human realm and the realm of magic called the Boiling Isles. Essentially, imagine Harry Potter with about 2000% more cosmic and existential horror. Think Gravity Falls, actually. Alex Hirsch works on this show as well, so it's actually pretty fitting. Shenanigans happen as they tend to do, and Ada agrees to teach Luz magic, in spite of humans A, being basically looked down upon as inferior beings, and B, being biologically incapable of magic. Right out of the gate, this show is very... not normal. No, that's the wrong word. Traditional, maybe. Immediately we're introduced to Ada and King, who are very much openly outcasts and considered weird, even by the standards of the Boiling Isles. The first adventure they go on with Luz involves them sneaking into a building called the Conformatorium, where people who don't fit into wider society are made to go until they can conform. It's about as subtle as my YouTube channel in that regard. Aside from being a social outcast and kind of a weirdo... Oh god, why the spiders? Luz is very much a untraditional protagonist for a piece of Western media, as she is made up of a lot of unconventional and, in a lot of circles, looked down upon traits. She's a girl, she's Dominican American, probably second or possibly even first generation immigrant. She speaks Spanish, is possibly neurodivergent, not too sure on that one. She's a nerd and is now confirmed bisexual. She's like a combination of all the things that society at large looks down on and rejects because it's different, like the bunch of massive neophobic cowards they are. In nearly all of these cases, just one of these traits would be enough to make someone an outcast in our world. Meanwhile, Luz is like a compilation of all of them, so she's actually the perfect kind of protagonist for this sort of show. Now, this is the part where normally a show would have us get into a big, giant, hippie circle and dance around a tree while we sing about how it's all okay to be different, and the show does do that, but the show makes it a point to go further than that. What needs to be understood about this world is that the Boiling Isles is supposed to be a parody of what a world like Hogwarts is. There's very little rhyme or reason to what the world of the Boiling Isles is like. The rain is boiling. There's an island made out of an undead titan. Apparently the school was taken over by another school when the faculty and students just invaded the place. Have no idea what was going on there. Best to just roll with it. And so on and so forth, whereas a world like Harry Potter tends to be more structured and traditionally sensible, with more strict rules, and more turfy. Basically, I'm going to try and make every Harry Potter fan on Earth see J.K. Rowling and the words turf whenever they close their eyes. You know she got her Human Rights Awards revoked because she's a transphobe? Crazy. Anyway, Owl House is weird, but there are efforts in place to make people conform to a singular set of standards throughout things like the Conformatorium, which is a bit of an oddity, isn't it? Things being this weird is part of the point, and I'll come back to how Luz being weird is important shortly. Again, one of the main points of Owl House is that humans can't do magic. Biologically speaking, they don't have a mutation which allows witches to do magic, which is this weird growth thing. So you might be wondering how exactly Luz does anything. If humans can't do magic, then what's the point of the series being about her learning magic? In the 4th episode, Luz learns about a sort of glyph type thing, which if she draws on a glyph to a corresponding element or action and then taps it, she's capable of doing spells. Immediately, we're rejecting an established norm of this universe, and I'll talk more about this later, but humans aren't supposed to be able to do magic, and Luz has just punched a hole through that in the course of 4 episodes. So already, symbolically, we've gotten a pretty major thing going on here, and this is part of the reason why I vehemently hate the theory that Luz is part witch, because it is a complete undermining of this aspect of the show. Wow, we have a human overcoming adversity and their biological limitations in order to complete in a brutal world of... Oh, no, never mind, she's part witch. Underdog story over, everyone. Go home. Great work, whoever came up with that, by the way. But Luz is about half the puzzle when we talk about social norms here. The other half comes in the form of the character of Amity Blight. The best way to describe Amity is that when we're first introduced to her, Amity is what you would expect of a rival to be in a show, in a very traditional bog-standard sense. She's introduced as being very arrogant, spiteful, cruel, and look, I love Amity, but let's be fair here, an absolute colossal bitch. I mean, this chick was so spiteful, she nearly got Luz killed, so yeah, there's that. We're not exactly expected to like her in the first episode. Her introduction is literally her just casually tormenting someone who isn't even arguing with her in a weird, one-sided rivalry situation that reminded me of high school. And now I make YouTube videos that like 50 people watch. Who won in the end, you pricks? And of course, people immediately fell in love with her because vaguely goth aesthetics, I guess, and I immediately began to question if I put too much faith in the good nature of humanity. But that's the first episode, and I have to say, Amity very, very quickly became my favourite character, because the way her character grows is not only so simple, it is so effective and relatable. Throughout the first half of the, at time of writing, first and only season, we see her as this character, rude, competitive to an insane degree, needlessly cruel in some cases, and so on and so forth. But bit by bit, we start to see glimpses of what exactly Amity is like underneath that, and it's not the character that we've been introduced to. In episode 5, we see Amity acting a bit more like Luz at the sight of a group called the Emperor's Coven, whom she wants to become a part of, and shows that she at least seems to take Luz a bit more seriously after seeing that Luz can do magic. In episode 6, we learned that the girl she was picking on in episode 3, Willow, used to be her closest friend. We see her with her friends in the same episode looking completely disinterested in them. At some point we learn Amity shares an interest in a book series called The Good Witch Azura with Luz. The real turning point came in episode 7. This episode was a true highlight. To make this as simple a recap as possible without going into too many spoilers, we start the episode seeing Amity reading stories to children at a library in a very gentle manner and learn that she's done this for a while now. We also meet her older siblings who remind me of my sister and how they interact with Amity. Without going into too many spoilers, during a pranking spree with Amity's siblings, Luz ends up accidentally going through her diary and we see glimpses of someone who is fundamentally deeply unhappy and isolated. And this becomes the first time we actually see Amity showing a form of weakness here. Episode shenanigans happen, and during which Amity and Luz nearly end up trapped together, and Luz's charming personality makes up not only making Amity laugh, but when the danger is over, makes her admit and acknowledge that Luz wasn't trying to do anything harmful, and that she recognized she wasn't being fair to her. From this point onwards, she changes in how she acts towards Luz, even treating her in a even friendly manner the next time we see her. This is something that the Owl House does quite well actually, character development over time. In a lot of Western shows there's a giant reset button that puts everything back to the status quo. Owl House doesn't. Continuity does exist, which means a lot of the character moments Amity has actually stick with her. In later episodes she's much more friendly to Luz, and we begin to learn more about her history. I mentioned that she used to be Willow's closest friend. We're told that she terminated this friendship because she saw Willow as a weaker witch. For a while that was it. In the episode Understanding Willow, we learned that Amity only did this because her parents threatened to use their connections to make it so Willow could never attend a Hexside, which is a witching school that the series focuses around. And the reason they did this is because Willow developed magic at a later age, and that was seen as Willow being far weaker than the norm. We learn that the people Amity hangs around with are the kids of her parents' friends and that she doesn't even like them. That's when it struck me more than anything. Amity is just as much of a nerd and a dork as Luz is, and when she lets her guard down she's just as capable of being nice and gentle with people as Luz is, and values and cherishes her friendships just as much, like we see that she did with Willow. But she changes how she acts because of the demands of the society and her environment. Amity is a person who has contorted herself to fit into the societal norms and expectations of the world in which she lives. She is born into a family that expects nothing but greatness and threatens to hurt her friend if she doesn't comply. And that is just part of what pushed her into becoming the person that she was when we first meet her. As we have to keep repeating because apparently this basic scientific truth hasn't been understood yet, people are products of their environment more than anything else, and this environment unquestioningly affected Amity into becoming what she became. To use a real-world example of this effect, poor people are not more likely to commit crimes because of some sort of neurological deficiency or whatever. It's because they're poor, which puts them into worse situations, that makes them more likely to commit crimes because that's the only way that they're going to be able to get out of the situation that they're in. Likewise with Amity, growing up in an environment in which she did, it's no wonder she becomes the sort of person that she did. Because she was affected by her environment and the threats and expectations therein. Is that an excuse for how Amity acted in the past? Does it excuse her from responsibility? No, but it is an explanation, and she doesn't attempt to shirk the responsibility of that either. By the way, in case you're unaware, spoilers now, in the episode Enchanting Rom Fight, we learn that Amity has a crush on Luz. No, I'm not interpreting anything. No, I'm not stretching, and no, we're not doing that weird Japanese girl crush trope. I'm talking explicitly confirmed she is romantically interested in the female lead, and the only way you could not come to this conclusion is if you're coping hard as hell. Hello Twitter, how are you doing? I mean, they had an entire dance sequence together, and then it was revealed at the end. What more do you want? Amity is LGBT, the first reoccurring LGBT character in Disney's history in an animated cartoon. According to an AMA on Reddit, Dana Terrace revealed that she was intended as a lesbian. Intended as a lesbian? What the hell do you mean intended? What does that even mean? And as I said earlier, Luz is bi, which is also a first for a lead in a Disney animated show. Hell yes on the representation, and Amity is a goddamned, awkward, flustered, adorable, panicking mess. And I adore her to bits. By the way, for the record, we support Lumity on this channel. Screw you. I will burn down several moderately sized nations as a sacrifice for the ship to set sail into the glorious automated luxury gay space communist sunset. I'm going full Tumblr on this one. That's going to be the end of the world, alright? Never mind the impending Third World War or the climate change or the growing tides of white nationalism and fascism. In 20 years it's going to be World War 63, the fandom ship wars, and I'm going to be in the trenches somewhere in Arkansas, squaring off against some white nationalist fascists who ships... What the hell do people even ship on the Owl House other than nobody? Hold on. Oh god, why does this exist? Yep, that'll do. Burn, you savage. What the hell am I talking about? Oh yeah, there is a point to be made regarding the LGBT-ness of this show. Remember how I said that Amity was forced to cut relations with Willow because her parents saw her as weak and not having magic at a younger age? Well, considering the fact that humans are biologically incapable of doing magic, what do we think Amity's parents are going to make of that? Yeah, we've thankfully moved past the age of openly saying stay away from the queers in media, and in spite of other criticisms I'm going to throw towards the society of the Boiling Isles, it's not a socially oppressive society. Willow, for example, appears to have two fathers, so we have to do this allegorically. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that we've got an allegory for homophobic parents here. How pleasant. Amity has traits that which in our world would make her an outcast, but she's forced to be someone she isn't for the sake of fitting into her society. In this case, someone being cruel to others who are beneath her in the social ladder and in magical power. But Luz has brought about a change in her. As characters, Amity is the physical representation on the way that social norms can affect a person, and Luz is the embodiment of a projection of those norms. Wonder who Amity is going to side with in this situation. Why is this of note? Well, why don't we have a look at their tutors? Segunda parte, autoridad de rechazo. Was that any good? I don't speak Spanish, I just got that off Google Translate.
Segunda parte, autoridad de rechazo.
I suppose now I get to pull back the sheath I had over your eyes. I'm an anarchist. I feel like I put in way too much effort into this joke. You know, the scary people from the movies that the government and Donald Trump keep talking about who smash up stuff and want there to be no law? Yeah, hey there, that's me. I'm one of those people. And that's not what anarchism is. Being an anarchist, my philosophy is based around, principally, the rejection of unjust hierarchies. A hierarchy being, put into the most simple of terms, and by that I mean lifted straight off of Google definitions, a system in which members of an organization or society are ranked according to their relative status or authority. Essentially the idea of who gets to tell who to do what. And there is no way I can define all the tenets of anarchism in a simple way without pissing off some fellow anarchists. So, to put it into a quick perspective of what I believe, I'm not anti-government, but I want that government kept in check by the common worker. I'm not opposed to law, but I want those laws to be just and based on the best interests of the people, and not corporations. And I want no one to be inherently above another person based on arbitrary designations such as, for example, skin color, gender identity, or how wealthy they are, or generally for that matter, nor in the workplaces, which I believe gives too much authority to bosses and CEOs and the likes. There are 1,000 other tenets to anarchism which are applicable, and I'll provide some links below to people who are a lot more better versed on this stuff than I am and talk about it in far more depth. But for the purposes of this video, I want to look at anarchism and its opposition to authority. So, with what I just described in mind, it shouldn't be a surprise that I oppose things such as dictatorships, fascism, and monarchies. These things are inherently hierarchical, and I oppose them because they are harmful to people, and I support things like liquid democracy, worker cooperatives, and the abolition of the state because they oppose those hierarchies. Why do I oppose hierarchy? Because hierarchy seems to make people miserable. Studies that I've looked into show that in things such as democracy, people tend to be happier and give them more agency. So that's a slam dunk right there. If the people living in these hierarchical systems like a monarchy have no meaningful way to oppose the authority, then the authority can just do whatever the hell they like. What exactly can the people in those systems do? When we're talking about a system, usually it's by a ruling minority ruling over a majority, a ruling family, a party of the state, a dictator, the military, and so on and so forth. And since I believe in the most well-being for the largest number of sentient beings, hierarchy is unjust, immoral, and a threat to the well-being and autonomy of a huge number of people. And also, fun fact, nearly every dictatorship on Earth is and has been immensely incompetent. Who could have guessed that not having a wide variety of options doesn't end well? Like with Luz and Amity embodying the two parts of norms in a society, there are two characters which embody the opposing ideas of anarchism and authority, respectively, these being Ada and Lilith. To describe this relationship and dichotomy, we need to first describe the world in which the Owl House takes place in, and the structure of this society. The Boiling Isles is a fantasy world which is ruled over by Emperor Belos. In universe, it is commonly taught that before he arrived and delivered unity and lessons on how to properly use magic, all witches would use wild and demon magic. Magic used within the Boiling Isles is heavily monitored and restricted, with those who use their magic carelessly in public being arrested, as well as those even breaking the mildest of laws, it seems. All witches are required to join something called a coven, which will determine the types of magic that they will be able to specialize in and perform, and will also completely restrict their ability to perform any other types of magic. This even goes into how Hexside operates with its track system, and what focuses of magic the students are allowed to learn from. The whole education thing in Hexside is actually very similar to how things operate here in Britain. Here in Britain, you get to enter year 10 and then you're given what are called GCSE options. Essentially, for the next 2 years, you're given a few compulsory classes, English, Science, Maths, IT, PE, and then you get given a choice out of half a dozen other subjects, many of which you will have learned absolutely nothing about beforehand, like business studies or motor vehicle. You are also informed that these GCSEs can be pretty major to determining what kinds of courses you can get to when you go to college, which in and of itself can be a huge factor in what you get to do when you go to university. Two things. First of all, are you kidding me? You're going to ask 14-year-old me to make these choices already? When I was 14, I wanted to be a soldier. Look how well that would have worked out for the literal anarchist. No one knows what they want to do at 14. Are you kidding me? Yeah, no wonder there have been reports of students being less stressed under a literal global pandemic than when they're doing their studies. This does not surprise me. Second of all, I've seen weird takes regarding Luz taking all of the tracks. We're coming back to that one, I promise you, in the next segment. Anyway, the exception to this one type of magic rule is the Emperor's Coven, which allows all types of magic to be used by its members. The leader of this coven is Lilith, Ada's sister. So, the Boiling Isles is an authoritarian state. You could even argue that it's fascistic in nature. There's something of a cult of personality that surrounds the Emperor, and to his laws, obedience is absolute. It's borderline religious with a lot of imagery and reverence towards them. It's clear that the coven system is little more than a way for him to keep the most powerful witches under his thumb, so no one could pose a threat to his reign. Episode 18 made that abundantly clear, though it's not really that difficult to guess even before then. If you aren't in a coven, you're arrested, and episode 18 makes it clear that they just sort of were burned to death in the past. Episode 19 now reveals that they're turned to stone. I guess the Emperor wanted to spice up the palace a bit using his interior decorating skills. I mentioned this in my My Hero Academia video, but this is kind of like banning the ability for anyone within a nation to own a firearm, which I'm already opposed to because I don't want the state to have a monopoly on lethal force. We've all seen how the police have been acting during the Black Lives Matter rise in the USA. I'm not comfortable giving them the only legal ability to use force. In both worlds, the abilities of the characters within that world, quirks in My Hero Academia and magic in the Owl House, are tied into biology. So it's a bit like not being able to use your left eye for your entire life. Bearable, but the quality of life you live and your personal freedoms are both immensely infringed upon. The past of the arrival of the Emperor is also somewhat mythologized. Before him there was nothing but chaos, and then he arrived like some sort of divine being, appointed himself as Emperor, and benevolently taught the misguided errors of the ways of the wild witches. And killed the ones that didn't obey him. I get the distinct feeling there's a bit of historical revisionism going on here, my friends. I'm not sure that this is quite as amicable as the Emperor would have us buy into. The more I wrote this script, the more I'm growing convinced that this world is fascist. A lot of this fits into fascist rhetoric. The world was in constant chaos, and then the Grand Leader came and fixed everything from chaos and now rules over it with an iron fist, granting people total physical autonomy only when they have bought into the full service of the state, and only the greatest servants get total autonomy? Absolute obedience to the social order and hierarchy. Constant contradictory lies. Talking about how your enemy is simultaneously a threat, but also irrelevant and easy to defeat. That's a pretty fascistic setup right there. Actually, you know what? Just for fun, why don't we go over Umberto Eco's 14 Points of Fascism? I always liked those. Umberto Eco's 14 Points of Fascism is a list of traits that tend to show up in fascist societies, either as active rulers of that society or as a group within it that seeks to implement their ideology onto their nation. Let's see which ones we can fit into the boiling aisle, shall we? 1. The cult of tradition. One has only to look at the syllabus of every fascist movement to find the major traditionalist thinkers. The Nazis' Gynos was nourished in traditionalist, synchristic, occult elements. So, while we don't know much about the Boiling Isles right now or of its history, we do know that 50 years ago Belos showed up, took over, and implemented the track and coven systems. And this has been the standard ever since. To break this tradition is literally illegal, so we can probably mark that as one. 2. The projection of modernism. The Enlightenment, the Age of Reason, is seen as the beginning of modern depravity. In this sense, Ur-fascism can be defined as irrationalism. A bit trickier, and I'm inclined to say no. We don't know if the Boiling Isles has an Enlightenment equivalent. It's possible that they did in the past, but for right now I'm not comfortable giving this a mark. Number 3. The cult of action for action's sake. Action being beautiful in itself, it must be taken before or without any previous reflection. Thinking is a form of emasculation. I don't know about anyone else, but the headmaster of Hexside making his students fight a giant demon monster that shows them their worst nightmares once a year, as opposed to thinking for 7 seconds that saying, maybe we should call professionals who know what they're doing to deal with this, seems pretty cult of action-y to me. A lot of Hexside seems to discourage thought as well, as does the Coven system. Just focus, as the headmaster apparently likes to say. 4. Disagreement is treason. The critical spirit makes distinctions, and to distinguish is a sign of modernism. In modern culture, the scientific community praises disagreement as a way to improve knowledge. A bit more ambiguous, but given the fact that Belos literally petrifies people who don't submit, I think we can just give this one a pass. 5. Fear of difference. The first appeal of a fascist, or prematurely fascist movement, is an appeal against the intruders. First, Ur-fascism is racist by definition. This one is a bit more complicated, to be honest. Humans are literally seen as inferior beings, but aside from that, the Boiling Isle seems incredibly diverse, with monsters and demons and witches all living in communities together. So this doesn't seem to be much of a thing, so no on this one, at least for right now. Number 6. Appeals to social frustration. One of the most typical features of the historical fascism was the appeal to a frustrated middle class, a class suffering from an economic crisis or feelings of political humiliation and frightened by the pressure of the lower social groups. Again, this one doesn't seem to be particularly accurate either. For the same reasons as above, though we don't know a ton about Boiling Isles culture. It's possible this does exist though, but I'm not going to make a point on something I don't have any information on. Number 7. The obsession with a plot. Thus, at the root of Ur-fascist psychology, there is an obsession with a plot. Possibly an international one, the followers must feel besieged. Considering the season finale, I reckon we can give this one a tick, eh? The Titan, the Day of Unity, etc., etc. Yeah, we're marking this one. 8. The enemy is both strong and weak. By a continuous shifting of rhetoric, focus, the enemies are both at the same time too strong and too weak. This one seems true, certainly based on how they treat Ada. She must be captured at all costs immediately. Sir, she escaped. Whatever, just keep an eye on them, it'll be fine. Like, it's a tad ambiguous and there isn't a real enemy that the population is riled up against. Humans, maybe? I'm inclined to mark this one as a yes, though, but I could have my mind changed later. 9. Pacifism is tracking with the enemy. For fascism, there is no struggle for life, but rather, life is lived for struggle. This one I'm not sure on. In my head, I think, oh yeah, absolutely, but there's no evidence right now, so I'm not comfortable marking this as a point. If the Emperor demanded that people, trying to capture Luz and people refuse to for pacifist reasons, I am beyond certain that would be considered treason. It's implied to be a thing within the Emperor's coven too, but again, I am not comfortable putting down a point for a point I can't prove. So we'll mark this one as a maybe. Contempt for the weak. Elitism is a typical aspect of any reactionary ideology. Oh, absolutely. Remember Amity and Willow? Humans are also seen as weak because of their lack of magic. Contempt for weakness is absolutely a huge part of this society. 11. Everyone is educated to become a hero. In Fascist ideology, heroism is the norm. This cult of heroism is strictly linked with the cult of death. I have no idea what this could be if not the Emperor's Coven. Everyone is encouraged to be the best that they can be so they can join the Emperor's Coven and get the benefits therein. This is absolutely a truth of their society. Number 12. Machismo and Weaponry. Machismo implies both disdain for women and intolerance and condemnation of non-standard sexual habits, from chastity to homosexuality. Now, this one is actually patently not true in the case of the Boiling Isles. Women serve in the Emperor's Coven in high positions of power, and its leader is a woman. LGBT literally seems like a non-existent issue in the Boiling Isles, to the point I don't even know if they'd have a distinction for it other than I like X, not Y. And magic is heavily restricted to use only within certain contexts, which could address the weaponry part, so no actually. Number 13. Selective populism. There is, in our future, a TV or internet populism, in which the emotional response of a selected group of citizens can be presented and accepted as the voice of the people. First of all, bloody hell, this one is alarmingly accurate for something written in 1995, huh? Second of all, the finale episode of this seems to suggest this actually. Willow's speech, for not explained spoiler reasons, did seem to spark more leniency. Fascists will sometimes back off a particular talking point if they realize it's not a public interest, or at least they'll stop talking about it in public. This is one of the points I'm more inclined to mark as a maybe though, because I'm not sure how in-depth this will be later on. Number 14. Fascism speaks in Newspeak. All of the Nazis on fascist schoolbooks made use of an impoverished vocabulary and an elementary syntax in order to limit the instructions for complex and critical reasoning. I mean, in a literal sense they have runes and the likes, but that's just a part of their society. I don't think there's any evidence for this being one in the least, so we'll go with a no. So that's 7 yeses, 5 no's, and 2 maybes, so I'm pretty inclined to say that yeah, this is a fascist society. You don't need to hit all the points on the list to be a fascist society, and a lot of world leaders right now hit more of these than the Boiling Isles does. There is actually another type of fascism which is considered in a few alt-right circles, which would actually net us another point, and that is called, and I'm not kidding here, homofascism. At its absolute least, though, it is absolutely authoritarian. Every aspect of this society, right down to its educational facilities, is primed to serve the authoritarian leader, but we'll get into that in the next segment too. I mentioned before that Ada is pretty much an anarchist, and I wasn't speaking hyperbolically there. Ada is a wanted criminal within the Boiling Isles for refusing to join a coven, something which she sees as the absolute form of control and force of obedience on part of the Emperor. She rejects authority in nearly all circumstances, disrespecting various guards, teachers, and pretty much anyone in any position of authority, including this clown. I swear to God I'm not making this up. She's a rebel, essentially, and has very clearly been one since she was very young. Like Luz, she wanted to shatter the track system at Hexside and take all tracks, although she didn't get to do this and was relegated to the potion track. Right now our knowledge on Lilith is... Okay, look, I'm going to level with you. I wrote this before the Season 1 finale, and now that's all come out, new information has somewhat made this less of an absolute parallel, but the situations are applicable nevertheless. We do know that she has always seemed to have more respect towards authority and desire to be in a position of authority. One good example of this would be that while Ada was the star player for the Hexside Grudgeby team, Lilith was the team captain. It's subtle, but it's quite a nice way to display their various dynamics as they grow older. Also, I'm on team throw Lilith off a bridge. Yeah, without spoiling what exactly happened in the finale, this would be like cutting someone's limb off, then stitching it back onto them, then breaking it, and expecting to get a medal for fixing the arm back onto the body and ignoring that you broke it afterwards. Again, like I mentioned on my channel before, I used to believe some pretty horrifying stuff myself, so I do like to believe in redemption, but this is pretty much the only part of the Owl House I can think to criticize, so yeah. Anyway, for the purposes of this video, what we have here are two characters who embody the opposing sides of the authoritarian right, libertarian left spectrum. Compared to Amity and Luz, they're a lot more easy to understand in all honesty. Ada values personal freedoms, while Lilith valued obedience to the Emperor. So these two are comparatively simple to explain in comparison to Luz and Amity, far more so in fact, so why did I even bring them up? Well, it just so happens that while Ada trains Luz, Lilith treats Amity as a protege, well, as a tool of a protege. So hold on a moment, what's this? The anarchist is teaching someone who is the embodiment of the rejection of societal norms, and the person who embodies someone who forced themselves to obey societal expectations is the protege of the leader to the Emperor's coven who embodies authority. And Amity has a crush on Luz. That's interesting to me because... Teil 3, Intersectionality. I gave up with the Spanish, okay? I can do German decently. There's a political theory that I ascribe to called intersectionality. Intersectionality is essentially the belief that most, if not all, issues within a society are interconnected amongst various lines of disadvantage, oppression, prejudice, and so on and so forth, which are referred to as axes of oppression. And that to end oppression in a society, you have to tackle all of these issues, not just one, and that these issues intersect with one another. This segment is going to get a bit heavy, but try to stick with me through this because it all ties back together neatly at the end. To use a real-world example, let's take a black male in the United States. Now, there have been literally thousands of studies to confirm everything I'm going to say here, and I will link some of them in the description if you're interested in doing further reading, but I know no one is, so to make this quick. There are multiple lines of oppression that a black male would face within the United States especially. Many black households are poor, for example, due to various policies that were implemented during the height of Jim Crow segregation laws, such as redlining. There have also been reports of policies such as this continuing to exist to this day in spite of it being illegal. These policies lead to majority black communities often becoming impoverished and poor because they were sectioned off due to already being poor thanks to, slavery and being legally second-class citizens in an openly apartheid society. This makes the people in these communities more likely to commit crime because that's one of the only ways that they can improve their material conditions. There is also the axis of racism which comes into play here. Psychological analyses have proven that if you're subject to constantly being told that you're more likely to do worse or act in a certain way, then you're more likely to do worse or act in that certain way. Ah, but there is no law that says racism is okay. Systemic racism doesn't exist. I hear you cry. Even if I were to buy into the myth that systemic racism doesn't exist, which is easily disproved by hundreds of meta-studies, that wouldn't change anything. There are hundreds of thousands and probably millions of people around the United States who explicitly hate black people because they're black, and all of us have racial prejudices, just like all of us have some sort of sexist prejudices. Myself included. I certainly don't claim to be perfect in this regard. And they exist in black people too. There's a lot of weird Nick Cannon types out there who are more or less just black Nazis. It's really fucking creepy. The reason for this is because we live in a society where there is a clear power being held by the white majority of a society. And because I want to be careful here, no, I am not saying that all white people are evil or bad or explicitly racist. I am not some woke-skulled SJW who hears and screams into the heavens about all cis white het men are bad and need to shut their mouths, okay? What I am saying is that we live in a society which has been impacted by hundreds of years of these issues, and that the environment that we have all grown up in installs these beliefs in us to a degree, and to claim that it ends at there being no specific laws in a book is naive at best and intentionally dishonest at worst. Society is so much more complicated than that. Anyway, back to the example I was making. There are 3 lines of oppression that the black male would face in this scenario. Statistically speaking, he is likely poor, which means he is more likely to commit a crime which will result in him being arrested. Obviously, he should be arrested in that scenario, but the issue there is that until we eradicate poverty, and especially help to uplift black communities out of poverty, black people will tend to be profiled as being poor and more likely to commit crimes because of the statistical likelihood that they are poor. It's essentially a self-fulfilling prophecy. Poorer communities are disproportionately black for the reasons that I stated earlier, and because they're poorer, they tend to be more likely to have higher crime rates, so no one invests in them, and they get policed more, which ensures their poverty. How does this contribute to their cycle of poverty? Well,
for weed smoking, for example, black people and white people consume weed at about the same rate, but black people get arrested like 4 times as much as it.
But why?
Because black neighborhoods are over-policed. Let's say you have 2 neighborhoods, white and black, and the black one's a little bit poor. With that being the case, poorer neighborhoods tend to commit more crime, so the police chief says, okay, we're going to direct more resources towards the poor, the black neighborhood. Then, another 5 years roll around, another crime study is done on both neighborhoods. It turns out that in spite of the fact that police are overrepresented in the black community is now committing more crimes, not less crimes than before. The reason for that is because now police are there to catch more crimes. But what that means is more of them are locked up, and it means the community continues its cycle of impoverishment. The over-policing of communities is what contributes to their disproportionate crime committing.
this results in policies such as stop and frisk, which is what happened in New York under Michael Bloomberg. It's essentially the axis of oppression of being poor as well. Second is the racial lines. There are plenty of racists on the police force. An FBI study that looked into this matter came back with the conclusion that the United States police force has been infiltrated with white supremacists, and this report was released in 2006, 14 years ago. So this is a well-documented issue that just hasn't been dealt with. Obviously not all cops are like this, ACAB and all that, but ACAB doesn't literally mean literally every single individual police officer is a bad person. It means that the systems these officers inhabit is corrupt and needs to be addressed. Lefties have some of the worst naming conventions I've ever freaking seen. And when we talk about data, we're not beaten back by, well look, there's a black policeman who beat up a black protester. We're all well aware of Ferguson, thank you. That's why we talk about the systems. That black dude I mentioned, by the way, he is far more likely to be sentenced to a minimum sentencing in jail for the crime he committed than a white person. If we were to assume that this person is a father, then that means that his household has one less parent bringing in money to support the household, which is vital for helping a family to get out of the poor socioeconomic conditions they find themselves in. The final line of oppression is one that I don't think a lot of people will expect, and that's the fact that this black man is, in this example, well, a black man. Now, while we live in a society where, yes, men tend to be the dominant socio-economic group, there are issues that they face. For example, men are seen as being more violent and aggressive than females are. There may be some truth to that statement, but this is used to justify excessive force against males in the criminal justice system. You don't see a metric ton of cops beating the ever-loving hell out of women, and certainly not as proportionately as you see them beating the crap out of men. It happened, sure, the death of Breonna Taylor being an example, but the proportion of abuse tends to be towards men. And people tell me gender studies is useless. I'd love to see the MGTOW and anti-feminist types explain to me exactly who helped collect this data along with the sociologists, since this would help their arguments. If we wanted to, although I already included it to a degree, we could add a system of oppression in the criminal justice system itself. Studies have shown that even accounting for every other conceivable metric, from past crimes to the severity of the crimes to socioeconomic conditions, everything else being equal, black people are still more likely to be made to serve the minimum amount of time in prison, or even get the death penalty more frequently compared to white people. There have been studies that show in areas where traffic police would stop people, they are 3 times more likely to stop black people, and even when the searches of white people's cars are more likely to show up contraband. And in this study, the disparity went down after dark, when it becomes harder to tell what race someone is when they're driving. If that's not systemic, I don't know what even is anymore. Now then, the black man we use in this example is affected by all of these issues, and they create a series of oppressive elements that affect them. And there are hundreds of these: gender identity, sex, skin color, ethnicity, sexual orientation, class, socio-economic conditions. All of it intersects and creates a society that still have axis of oppression. This particular person is black, male, and lives in a nation filled with white supremacist cops. All these combine to create the oppression he exists within today. To use a few more simple examples with this principle, a black woman in the United States has a harder time than a white woman because she has to deal with race being a factor against her, as well as the barriers of being a woman. If we make it a trans black woman, she has a harder time than the black cis woman because of her being trans and that additional factor. If we make it a gay trans black woman, then they get it harder than the straight trans black woman because of the added axis of oppression, and this carries on and on and on. That, in essence, is intersectional thinking, which is what I've been talking about here, and the levels of this can depend on the various qualifiers of the individual in question. So that's all fine and dandy, and supported by basically every major academic institution on planet Earth, and possibly the secret moon base that may or may not exist. But what does this have to do with anything regarding the Owl House? Well, I'm an anarchist. I oppose capitalism, nation-states, states as a concept, and many of the societal norms that exist today. But do you think that I got to these beliefs because someone explained to me the dangers of capitalism outright? That I was scrolling through YouTube, saw a video called Capitalism Bad by Company Killer 69, or literally anything by Hakeem or Caleb Maupin. I didn't start out hating capitalism. And unlike those morons, I don't hate capitalism because it's capitalism. What actually pulled me over was Star Trek, believe it or not. Socialism was explained to me as creating a world like Star Trek, and that society enraptured me. It wasn't the economics though, it was the social aspect that appealed to me. What pulled me over fully were the videos that explained to me the social issues around me. Talking about how there are issues in our society, and how there are people that are treated unfairly by systems that I thought were fair, and how we could improve them, and how we could make life better for all people, and how these systems didn't even make sense in the first place. I was pulled left not because I was told about the inefficacy of capitalism, but because I realized that there were people being treated unfairly within those systems, and it naturally followed from that I began to question capitalism, because it seemed like capitalism seems to keep affecting these issues. I was pulled a lot to the left on economic issues because of Jim Sterling, who made me realize that capitalism was even harming the entertainment products I liked and was abusing people to do it. And then I began to realize that these issues are soaked into so much of the way we live our lives now, that at every corner we are bled dry of what we earn from our jobs, now plural since one doesn't seem to cut it for a lot of people anymore, that we hate, by companies who exist only to soak up more and more of that money, and how our landlords will do everything in their power to bleed us off the deposits that we put down for rent, and will try to get us on other aspects while providing the bare minimum. That the work we do is worth far more than what we're paid, but our bosses take that little bit for themselves to garner a bit of personal profit, which is why while the workers do the work, the bosses get richer and richer while doing less of the work. Because all of that is fundamentally not only unfair, but exploitative and of everyone in a society, and it doesn't work. I hate capitalism because capitalism is harmful. On the left, we call this class consciousness. And when you oppose these social things, when you oppose racism in the police, for example, you're pushing back against an entire system of control. Why do you think cops, the government, and the state are all so keen to just ignore racism in the police force and pretend it doesn't exist? It gives them less control. And there are, again, as documented by the FBI, plenty of people in those systems who house active prejudices and have a desire to act on them in these positions of control. So let's look back at the Owl House again. In the world of the Owl House, Luz is a human in a world which looks down on humans, and is able to, in spite of that, learn magic. She is able to subvert the Hexide track system and take on every track that Hexide has to offer. She will constantly stand up to bullies, Amity originally, and another character called Boscha next, and various other characters and demons who will harass and endanger others. Through her interactions and the way she acts, she is able to certainly batter a few expectations surrounding humans and their inability to do magic. Through addressing the various issues throughout the Boiling Isles, such as the single-track system for example, she is able to improve their society for the better, even bringing people over who originally opposed her, Amity in such a case, and even becoming romantically interested in her. And Amity is in a very interesting position, protege to the Emperor's Coven leader. See, let's say that Amity was asked to do something, anything really, for the Emperor or for Lilith, before Luz showed up. What do we think Amity would do? In fact, here's a better question. Even though we know that the Amity we saw in the first episode isn't the way Amity actually is, do we think that she would have even hesitated to do what was demanded of her? Even if she knew that she would end up hating herself further down the line? Because I don't think so, because people are subject to their environment, and that can have a huge impact on how we act. Even when we tell ourselves we wouldn't ever act that way or feel it's wrong. Now that Luz is in her life and pushed her against the various injustices and encouraged her to oppose the cruelty within the Boiling Isles, like with Willow being bullied and how Amity abandoned her friends to side with Luz and Willow in Wing It Like Witches, at the very least we're going to see Amity hesitate. And the hesitation is a step forward from where she was. Remember when I said that we were going to come back to the absurdity of the track system's compulsory nature in the previous segment? We're back on it, baby. Here's the continuation. I've seen a few people give the fact that Luz got her way and took on all the tracks a raised eyebrow. A lot of people calling it essentially Luz just getting her own way, you know how it be. And yeah, it's good that Luz got her own way on that one. That's the point. The track system is a nice and easy way to normalize people for what happens when they get sent into the Coven system. And the Coven system is a way for Emperor Bellows to have an iron grip around the throats of any witches who would want to rise up against him. If everyone is under a Coven and can only use one type of magic, that makes it really goddamned easy for them to be stopped. At that point, they need an army to do anything. Except you still have the Emperor's Coven. So even if you have an army, and you had people from 10 different Covens taking on one member of the Emperor's Coven, that Emperor's Coven guy can use all the magic of your various Covens, and another 100 types. Best of luck, my dudes, you're gonna bloody need it. The point of Luz getting all of the tracks is symbolic in that sense, because it is the ultimate rejection of the authority of the state, of her essentially refusing to play the game of the Emperor. Obviously, Luz wasn't thinking of an active revolution at that point, now she kinda seems to be, maybe? But the point remains. Maybe they didn't think it would matter too much since she's a human, but let's not forget other characters were introduced in the first day as well. Viney and Gerbo and Barkus, and now they are also doing dual tracks. And that is also important. Because if they can dual track, that raises questions in the other students. Literally, what is stopping them from doing the same? There is no reason they can't do that if they want to, aside of completely arbitrary restrictions that just so happen to benefit the state. Amity is going to reject the Emperor's Coven, and it's going to be because she recognizes what is happening there, and that will be because of Luz. I don't know if it will be immediate, but in the end, she's going to, because by pushing against authority in whatever way you can, from whatever point in the social ladder you're on, wherever it happens, from the lowest levels of society to the absolute highest, and trying to make it better, and opposing the various acts of oppression wherever they occur, you inherently challenge a system, and then it's only a matter of time before you question the entire system, and the way your society functions, and in doing so, you bring people over, and to change a system, you need people. On the left, we have a lot of people who scream about how all oppression is because of capitalism, and how if we were to get rid of capitalism, everything will sort itself out. We call them class reductionists.
From what, Vosh? They're not going to form their own state or nation in this country.
Wait,
you
can't form... Wait, are you saying that people of color aren't oppressed in this country?
I'm saying they're oppressed are all working people, but, it's like if you frame
No. Even bourgeois black and brown people are oppressed for their race.
Bourgeois black and brown people, they're still our class enemy.
I never said they're not. Why are you pivoting? I just said that they're oppressed for their race. So yes.
Who cares? I mean, honestly...
Wait. Who cares? This is exactly what I mean. Yeah. So, wait, really quickly. Because I think that's the most apt thing you've said so far. I agree. You don't care. And your excuse for not caring is every bit as legitimate as the excuse of some racist saying they don't care about black people just because. Or some wealthy fucking industrial autocrat saying they don't care about the plight of the worker just because. At the end of the day, you're just not comfortable talking about those issues. And I don't know what your personal reasons are for it.
I call them shell-brained morons who don't have the first clue how political efficacy works. They claim that this is because capitalism inherently puts people against one another because if the workers are divided and arguing amongst themselves, they're not united and arguing against the capitalist class. And that last part is true, and for some people, perhaps maybe a class analysis is the best way to bring them to the left. It's certainly the one that I think is the most important at the end of the day because that affects all of us. But the vast majority of people start their questioning on the ethics of their society by the opposition of the injustices within it, and the desire to help those who are hurt by those axes of oppression. And those axes don't just evaporate because capitalism goes away. What do you think is going to happen here? We abolish workplace hierarchy in the commodity format, and then suddenly some 80-year-old racist from Harrison, Arkansas, Ku Klux Klan stronghold, which has literal diversity as a code word for white genocide billboards about the place, is going to find the black dude, throw his arm over the guy and go, "You're alright, you are." That's not how this works. This has never been how any of this works. And Owl House understands that. This show has not been afraid to shit-talk capitalism and has critiqued it a couple of times, actually.
What kind of game are you playing?
Capitalism, where everyone wins except you.
Emperor Bellos' reign could even be interpreted as an allegory for the capitalist class. He seems to require a degree of magical substance to function. I wonder how he's getting that. And even if that's not the case, we've seen a few characters profit from the messed up systems here anyway. And we've got a glimpse of that without those systems. The witches were free to be able to utilize whatever magic they so desired. Wild and demonic, described by a very biased source as being nothing but chaos. Only Ada doesn't seem particularly demonic. Chaotic, sure. And not exactly a paragon of virtue either. But bad? Not really. She seems pretty solid and is clearly powerful, but is Ada actually unique? Or is she just the only character in this world that lives as witches are supposed to, free of arbitrary restrictions placed upon her by her society, by a dictator who thinks he's above his own rules? Did you know that there is a concept called primitive communism? It's a way of describing how hunter-gatherer societies used to live. The very simple way of describing it is that when we all lived in tribes, we didn't have anything like private property, money, or anything like that. But work still got done because it needed to be done, and skills were valued by the tribe. People learned medicine, for example, not because they expected a monetary reward, but because the skills helped the tribe, and someone needed to do it. And that's the way humans lived naturally. And communism, as it's preached today, is a political philosophy designed to return to that, but accounting for technology and creating a moneyless, classless, stateless society, which is my end goal. That's what we mean on the left when we talk about how humanity is inherently socialist. It's how we lived and how we're supposed to live, communally and working together, not in boxes, isolated from the rest of mankind between work hours, at places that we have no investment in and actively dream of burning down. So what was the natural state of the witches on the Boiling Isles, I wonder? And I wonder if this show will make it a point that this is something to aspire towards again. Anarchist comrade Ada might well be onto something here. Amity is going to abandon the Emperor's Coven and join Liz's side on this, I am absolutely certain. And it's not going to be because she just has a brainwave and realised dictatorial monarchs are bad, but because she was reached on a lower level, and that will start her path onto revolution. This seems like less of a hot take now that Lilith sided with Ada and Luz, but the point remains. I'm good at analysing politics. I'm not a theorist. I have a decent understanding of political theory at best, and I couldn't even begin to theorise how Howell House's story is going to play out. I'll leave that to the theorist channels. I have a few ideas in mind. Maybe it'll go down the path I said it will. Maybe there will be some twists. Maybe Luz and Amity will hook up. I'm begging you here, Donna, grant me this mercy. Or maybe the story beats will go down a different path. I don't know. But I am very confident that the politics that I have analysed here are accurate and will be reflected in whatever comes next for this show. And perhaps I'll do another video on the themes and messages of this show come Season 2. I certainly enjoy it enough to do that. Shows like The Owl House are honestly really rare these days, because it's clear that this show was made by people, and not a design by committee thing. heart went into the Owl House, and I do think it deserves the support and the ratings. I honestly don't know if this show will get a season 3. I would like it to, but from the looks of things, the ratings have never been particularly incredible for a Disney show, and part of me thinks it won't even want a season 3. I think that it's going to be a very self-contained sort of show that knows how long it wants to be. A bit like Gravity Falls, becoming a bit of a trend of everything that Hirsch works on, huh? And that'll suck, but I'll certainly respect the creative wishes and the creators of the show if that's what they want to do, because I think it's very important to respect the creative wishes of the creators. But what I don't want to hear is that this show only got 2 seasons because the interest wasn't there from Disney. So please, Christ, support this show if you can in whatever ways you can. Do fan art, fan fiction, watch the official channels, spread it on your bloody MySpace page, whatever, I don't care. Just watch the show and support it however you can. I saw a link on Tumblr to people talking about making a fan-made musical episode. Not a fan of musicals, but I'll be linking that below because that sounds bloody incredible, and if you'd like to go and support that, by all means, go right ahead. These are the kinds of shows that we need to be making to bring Western animation up to this par with Eastern animation and make animation a respected art form in the West. And god damn it, this show should be rewarded for all the work that went into it. We're not going to be tearing Disney to the ground anytime soon, so let's push to make shows in our favour. Oh, and keep your torches and pitchforks ready because we have one very specific witch to hunt down at the first sign of betrayal. If you're interested in learning more about leftism in general, I have a playlist on my channel called Valuable Leftist Content, where I put in lots of good videos that I found full of theory, debates, responses, from places and channels that I think are excellent and worth supporting. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and on screen at some point will be other videos like this one that I've made. I'm very happy that I got the chance to talk about this show because this show is amazing and I have many thoughts on it, and I'll be seeing you for something completely different next time. See yous.